Story 1. The man in the median was pointing at my passenger seat. This happened to me in 2018 on a long haul from North Dakota down to New Mexico. I just upgraded rigs 2 weeks before. Newer model, built-in dash cam, satellite radio, the works. I remember the layout clear as day. One of those cabs where the passenger seat's got a springy kind of bounce to it and the belt retracts automatically. I was traveling south through Nebraska around 3 in the morning. Highway was dead. Nothing but open blackness and the soft humming of tires on pavement. I kept one earbud in, listening to an old blues playlist. Something about the late night, that kind of music keeps your head in the game. I hadn't stopped since Lincoln, was planning to hit a diner just past the Kansas border. I remember thinking I hadn't seen another set of headlights for a good hour. Out of habit, I glanced across at the passenger seat. It was empty, obviously. Clean. No cooler, no jacket, nothing. I never keep anything there when I'm running solo. Helps visibility. But then something caught my eye. The seat belt. It was locked in place. I remember staring at it, confused. It was fully clipped in. Belt snug. The kind of snug that only happens when someone's weight is pulling against it. I reached over and tugged it. It didn't give much. Tense. Held. For a second, I thought maybe I'd clipped it earlier without noticing. Maybe I'd leaned across while parked and fastened it for some reason. But even as I thought that, I knew I hadn't. There'd been no reason to, and I hadn't stopped since fueling up hours ago. I unlatched the belt. It snapped back fast into the side, like it had been under tension. The seat bounced slightly. Not much, just enough to make the springs creak. There was a shape in the cushion, indented, not deep but visible, like someone had been sitting there long enough to leave a trace. I didn't stop driving. I just sat back slowly, kept my hands tight on the wheel. I told myself the belt must have jammed, or maybe there was something off with the tensioner. But even then, my chest tightened with this strange, cold logic. It wasn't the belt that scared me. It was the impression it had been used, recently, and not by me. A few days later, I was back home. I always offload my dashcam files to an external hard drive when I get in, just in case of insurance claims. I'd nearly forgotten about the seatbelt incident, told myself it had been a wiring glitch or some kind of spring failure. But the memory was still floating there, dull and unfinished. That night I decided to skim through the footage. Not for anything specific. More curiosity than anything. The clip from that stretch through Nebraska was clean, empty highway. My headlights tracing along cracked asphalt and yellow dashes, silence under the hum. But when I raised the volume, I heard something I hadn't expected. Breathing. It wasn't mine, not exactly. I could hear myself shift occasionally. A cough, a sigh. But this other sound, it was too regular. Too shallow, a low, rhythmic exhale, like someone sleeping. It wasn't background noise, it didn't match the truck's engine or road rumble, and it didn't start at the beginning of the clip. It came in suddenly. Just after a curve, I remembered clearly, the one near that empty rest stop. The sound lasted a solid 20 minutes, never wavered. I paused the video, rewound it, listened again with headphones. That same slow, steady breath. And here's the part I haven't told anyone. At one point, about 12 minutes in, I pulled over to check my taillights. It's right there in the footage. You can hear my door open, hear me step down onto the gravel, hear the door slam. But the breathing doesn't stop. It keeps going. Inside the cab, for 3 minutes while I'm outside. Then my door opens again, and I climb back in. That's when it fades. I closed the laptop, sat there staring at the floor of my garage for a long time. I haven't played that clip since. There's a stretch of highway outside Pueblo, Colorado, that I don't take anymore. I was doing an overnight run, hauling pallets down to Albuquerque, midwinter. Roads were mostly clear, but the air was dense. That kind of stillness that presses into your skin. I was maybe 6 miles north of town when I saw him. Standing alone in the median, middle-aged man, dark jacket, head slightly down, pale face. What caught me wasn't that he was there. You get hitchhikers sometimes, even out here. It was that he wasn't looking at me. He was pointing, not out at the road, not waving, just pointing at my passenger window. I slowed down just a little, enough to take him in. His arm stayed rigid. His eyes never met mine, but the angle was precise, deliberate, straight toward the passenger seat beside me. I kept driving, didn't stop, but the entire next hour I kept checking that seat, as if I'd look over and finally see something. Next morning, after delivery, I was doing a wipe down of the cab. I keep my rig clean, habit. But as I leaned in to Windex the inside of the windshield, I saw it. 2 marks near the lower corner of the glass, faint but visible. Water stains, maybe condensation, maybe oil, in the shape of handprints. Not fingerprints, palm prints, facing inward, like someone had been bracing their hands against the glass from inside the cab. There were no signs of a leak, no dampness around the seals, no glove smudges on the dash, just those prints. I wiped them away, but I can still feel where they were. I asked around later, at a diner just south of Rayton Pass, mentioned the man in the median, not the prints. The cook there, old guy, former driver, didn't look surprised. He just nodded and said, "You saw one of the anchors. They don't look at you. They look at what's with you." I never asked what he meant, didn't want to know. To this day, I keep that passenger belt unbuckled, always, even if it means the warning light stays on. Story 2. The voice on the CB radio knew my route before I spoke it. This happened in 2021, when I was running a solo haul from Spokane down to El Paso. I'd been driving for 10 years at that point, long enough to know how strange your brain gets after the 15th hour behind the wheel. I've had my share of roadside illusions, shapes that weren't there, deer that turned out to be shadows. It happens, but this wasn't that. It started with my CB radio. I hadn't used it in days. Cell coverage was solid across most of the route, and honestly, CBs had turned into more of a nostalgic accessory. I kept mine on for background chatter, weather updates, rare trucker-to-trucker alerts, nothing more. I was 3 hours south of Salt Lake City, somewhere near Panguitch, Utah. The road was narrow, winding, with nothing but sandstone cliffs and dry air pressing against the windows. I remember glancing at the CB set and thinking it was oddly quiet, not even static. Then it clicked. The power light was off. I reached for the dial to switch it on. Before I could touch it, a voice came through. "Back in 2014, you drove that old Mack with the cracked speedometer. How's the knee since the wreck in Tulsa?" I froze. The voice wasn't familiar. Calm, genderless, slight southern drawl. No trucker handle, no brake or over, just that flat, intimate tone. I didn't respond. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't pressed the mic. I hadn't powered the unit. The radio shouldn't have been working. I reached for the switch again. The voice returned, slower this time. "No need to answer. You didn't answer back then either." The hair on my arms lifted. The truck was warm, midday heat bouncing off the cliffs. But I felt cold. I shut the CB off manually. The power light stayed on for a second too long before fading. I told myself it was a bleed over from some nearby transmission tower. Maybe someone messing around on a private band. I didn't really believe that. Later that evening, I pulled into a rest stop outside Page, Arizona. I parked beside 2 other semis, rolled my window halfway, and shut my eyes for a bit. I didn't sleep, just needed to take the edge off. The radio clicked on, clear as a bell. "Did you like the burrito at the place near Riggins? You always pick bad sources, always did, back when you had the red thermos too." That Riggins stop had been 400 miles ago. And the red thermos? I hadn't used that since my first year driving, the one with the cracked lid and duct tape grip. I yanked the unit from its mount and pulled the cord out. The radio went dark. It didn't come back that night, but I didn't sleep either. I just sat there in silence, wondering how it had known. The next day, I kept driving. I checked the CB radio in the morning, still dead. I even twisted the wires loose and let them dangle. Outside Flagstaff, the road flattens. Long stretches of tan brush and telephone poles, no shoulder, no billboards, just heat and asphalt. It was there that I saw the exit. It came up fast, no warning. A left side exit, which isn't typical, branching off into a smooth arc of fresh pavement. There was no sign, no mile marker, no off-ramp number. Just new blacktop disappearing into a small curve. I slowed down. My GPS didn't register it. The map kept me straight, no indication of a split. But the road was real. I saw tire marks. Recent. I didn't take it. Something about it felt expectant, too clean, too sudden. I passed it. 5 seconds later, the CB crackled, heavy, breathy, static. Then, "You skipped the turn, that's your call, but you'll never know what we saved you from." The voice was the same, dry, deliberate. But this time it sounded closer, not over the air, not distant, like someone was in the back cab speaking softly just behind my seat. I stopped the truck, killed the engine, climbed out, walked around the whole rig, opened the trailer. Empty. Nothing but straps and dust. I checked the CB again. Still dark. I sat in the dirt beside the driver's door and stared back down the road. The exit was no longer visible. I don't mean it was far, I mean it was gone. Where there'd been an off-ramp 10 minutes ago, there was nothing but grass and guardrail. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. When I looked at the screen, the road behind me was still there, but it looked different, cracked, faded, like it hadn't been repaved in 20 years. I deleted the photo, started the engine, kept driving, but from that point forward, I began to watch for turns that weren't there. The phantom CB effect isn't something you'll find in any handbook. It's a rumor, a whisper, something veteran drivers mention when they've had one drink too many, talking about the channels that don't exist. After the voice incident, I started asking around, quietly. 2 truckers at a bar in Santa Fe told me similar stories. Unlicensed frequencies that only turn on once, then never again. Voices that say things no one else should know. Not quite threats, not quite warnings, more like course corrections. I threw out the CB, tossed it into a rest stop dumpster near the state line. Bought a new one in El Paso, high-end model. Installed it myself, new wiring, fresh antenna. The first night back out, everything felt normal. Silent desert, occasional chatter from passing drivers. Then, just after midnight, crackle, a long burst of static. Then, "Still too proud to say thanks?" I didn't answer. The radio wasn't even set to an active channel. I switched it off. Silence. When I stopped the truck, I removed the battery from the unit entirely. That night I dreamed of the voice. Not a nightmare. Not quite. Just the sound of someone speaking facts I didn't know about myself. Your sister's middle name. The motel room you cried in after the rollover. That night in Omaha when you almost quit. They weren't threatening me. They weren't mocking. It felt like inventory. Like someone was keeping track. Weeks passed. The voice didn't come back. But sometimes when I park at certain rest stops, especially ones I've never been to, I find things, small things. A receipt from a truck stop diner I haven't visited in years. A can of soda I used to drink but haven't touched in a decade. Once, even a road atlas. Marked in red pen with a route I'd driven only once in my life. Always placed carefully, never torn, never left by accident. Like someone was saying, "We still remember, even when you pretend you don't." I haven't used the new CB in months, but I leave it plugged in, powered down, just in case they decide to speak again, because next time I might have questions. Story 3. I slept at a rest stop and woke up in a place that doesn't exist. This happened to me in late 2022. I was driving a solo run through central Idaho, somewhere between Arco and Chalice. Just forest, dirt road shoulders, and the occasional overlook lot. It was already late, pushing 1:40 a.m. And I'd been on the road nearly 12 hours. The fatigue hit me fast. 1 minute I was wide awake, scanning road signs, then suddenly I was fighting to keep my eyes open. That kind of fatigue doesn't creep, it drops. I knew better than to push it. So when I saw a blue sign for a public rest area, I pulled in without hesitation. The lot was small, maybe 4 spots for trucks, 6 for cars, 2 vending machines by the bathroom building, a wooden picnic shelter off to the right, barely lit by a single amber lamp. I remember pulling into the first truck bay, cutting the engine, and rolling down the window slightly to get some airflow. It was cold, but still, smelled like pine and wet concrete. I reclined my seat, shut my eyes. Next thing I remember, I was awake. At first I thought it was morning. The sky was pale but not bright, that early bluish light before sunrise. The lot looked exactly as I remembered. My rig, the concrete pads, the shelter. But something felt off immediately. It took me a full minute to understand what. Nothing was moving, not the trees, which stood perfectly still, despite what should have been a breeze. Not the vending machine screens, which were lit but frozen. Not the bugs. There were none. No hum, no chirp. I stepped out of the cab slowly. The pavement beneath my boots felt wrong, solid, sure. But there were no cracks, no oil stains, not a single tire mark. I walked toward the vending machines. My throat was dry. I hadn't had water since Twin Falls. They looked normal, soda and snack options, same brands. But when I pressed the Coke button, it didn't move. No resistance, no click. I tried another. Same thing, no sound. The bill slot had a faint glow, the LED strip inside, but even that was too consistent. A perfect line of red. The whole machine looked like a photograph lit from behind. I turned back toward my truck. For a second I thought the cab door was open. It wasn't, it was just too clean. My rig's paint was chipped, some scratches on the passenger side. None of that was there. It looked like my truck. It just didn't look like it had ever been driven. It was like someone had recreated the rest stop, piece by piece, and they'd gotten almost everything right. Almost. I walked the perimeter twice. There was no road, no entrance, no exit. Where the highway should have been, where I'd turned in just hours earlier, was a grassy shoulder and a line of unmoving trees. I paced back to the bathrooms. The door wouldn't open. I could see the fluorescent light inside, flickering almost perfectly, but the handle wouldn't turn. It wasn't locked. It just didn't move, like it had never been meant to. I stood by the picnic shelter for a while. That's when I saw him. A man walking across the lot, mid-50s maybe. Jeans, brown jacket, worn cap, limp in his right leg. He didn't look at me, just crossed the lot diagonally, from nowhere to nowhere. Didn't acknowledge me, didn't make a sound. Then 5 minutes later I saw him again. Same direction, same limp, same gait. Only this time he turned slightly, just enough to glance in my direction. Not long, just a flick of his eyes. I called out, nothing. He walked out of view behind the restrooms. I followed. There was no one there. Then 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Exactly the same. He crossed the same space, walked the same path, but this time he paused mid-lot, looked at me directly, no expression, then kept walking. I waited for him to come around again. He never did, but I knew then I wasn't alone. Whoever or whatever was behind this place, they weren't hiding, they were watching, and they wanted to see what I'd do next. I lost track of time. I don't mean I was there for hours, I mean time didn't pass. The light never changed, the shadows never moved. The vending machine stayed lit, the air stayed still. I tried everything, hitting the horn, reconnecting my radio, starting the ignition, which worked but didn't rev right. The RPM needle twitched, but I didn't feel it, like the truck was acting. Eventually I climbed back into the cab and closed my eyes. Not to sleep, just to reset. I told myself I'd count to 100, then open them. I counted slowly, out loud. When I hit 47, I heard something, a soft clicking, like someone walking on gravel. I opened my eyes. Everything was black, just black. No light, no lot, no trees. But I felt the cab seat under me, the fabric, the belt buckle pressing my thigh. I closed my eyes again, breathed. When I opened them next, it was daylight, the real kind, yellow, bright, and I was at a rest stop, but not the same one. Different layout, different vending machines, actual trucks parked nearby. I stepped out, shaky, checked my phone. 8:23 a.m., checked my logs. Still showed the last rest stop I'd pulled into, the one near Chalice. Checked my dash cam. The footage was normal, until it wasn't. From 1:41 a.m. to 8:23 a.m., the camera showed one frame, unchanging. My truck, parked, no movement. Except at the very end, the final second of footage, as if tacked on, showed something new. A road sign, close up, like someone had held it in front of the lens. White letters on black steel, bent, dirty, but readable. Do not return. No location, no number, just those words. I don't know where I went that night, or who sent the sign, but I haven't stopped at a rest area since. Not once, not even during storms, because I don't think that place was a dream. And I don't think it's gone. I think it's waiting for me to forget and pull off the highway.